C'est formidable de transformer Saint-Thomas en agora antique. Je suis très heureux d'être avec vous aujourd'hui pour introduire la conférence de Bruno Latour. And I will switch to English because we have a chance, we are very lucky to have presidents of international universities that are here to celebrate our anniversary. Thank you for that. Ladies and gentlemen, dear Bruno, dear colleagues and students, dear professors, thank you so much, Bruno, for doing us the honor and friendship of giving this lecture about the new free university and for telling us what it means 150 years after the creation of Sciences Po by Émile Boutmy. Bruno, you are an eminent professor and researcher, a key figure in the modernization of Sciences Po, a man of conviction and action, and I have to add, a man of imagination. I have to say that before becoming president of Sciences Po, I had read many books from Bruno, many books. I was an admirer, but after 9 months at Sciences Po, now I'm definitely a fan. You had, dear Bruno, the intuition that one of my excellent predecessors, Richard Descoings, would allow you to accomplish the ambitious goal you set for the institution as scientific director to renew social sciences and humanities research, nothing less. This meeting between you and Sciences Po was one of those true miracles that deeply shapes our institution. I can say that there are elective affinities between you and this very special university that is Sciences Po and a profound community of soul. Sciences Po can only be very grateful for everything that you brought since you joined us in 2006. To name but a few of your creations, the Media Lab, a research center that connects the social sciences with new digital tools, the Forecast program, which rethinks the standards of pedagogy to explore contemporary controversies, and SPIP, a unique training program which combines artistic practices with scientific methods to understand social issues with one objective, political decision-making. You had this intuition that the new frontier of social sciences had to do with art, with fiction. That examples show the broadness of your areas of interest and contributions for research. Dear Bruno, everyone knows that you are a great intellectual, a philosopher, sociologist, anthropologist, internationally recognized. But Bruno, you are more than a great intellectual, more than an eminent professor. You are a kind of enchanter, a fantastic wizard who never stops experimenting, investigating, inventing, crushing, shaking up, in short, renewing the ways of thinking and expressing social sciences. An alchemist who transformed into gold the lead of too narrow, cautious, and conventional thinking, a man of conviction and action, using your knowledge and impact for the common good, in particular in regard to the environmental crisis that is already shaping the world of tomorrow. For instance, with the Latour Fund, which has allowed us to raise more than 2 million euros, we are able to recruit 12 postdoctoral researchers to contribute to finding new solutions. For that, dear Bruno, we thank you very much. I cannot tell you how happy I am today to hear your words. The words of Bruno are like a compass to navigate in our divided and entropic world. And now, dear Bruno, I let you the floor to inspire us and to show us where we need to land, ou atterrir, in the next 150 years. Thank you.
I keep my hat because it's very cold. We are assembled this afternoon to celebrate the 150th anniversary of this school, founded against all odds by Émile Boutmy. As you can read in the beautiful volume that has been written and compiled for the occasion by the school historian Mary Scott, like all his French compatriots, Boutmy had been deeply traumatized by the catastrophic conclusion of the Franco-Prussian War in 1870, and most probably even more by the short-lived Commune in 1871, as if a social defeat had been added to a military one. Also, Boutmy, like many of his friends in the media sphere of the time, was very impressed by the massive investment made in science, laboratory, and university by the German. For most of the French elite, that was the main cause of Germany's crushing power. Louis Pasteur had been arguing the same thing before and after the war, as for instance in many of his pleas to the then emperor. Out of their laboratory, he said, physicists and chemists are like soldiers in the battlefield without weapons. And after the war, he published a pamphlet that Boutmy had certainly read, Why France Did Not Fight Great Men in Time of Crisis. Sorry for the women, and no women at the time. Boutmy and Pasteur, together with many of their contemporaries, knew they could not count on a French university system which was functioning in a way that could match Bismarckian Germany. So when he said that he wanted a free institute, you should not now read this proposition as if it had been advanced in Britain, Germany, Italy, or the United States, where the word free would be nothing but a nuance among many free universities. In France, at the time, to associate free with university was really radical. Don't forget, the university had been destroyed by the French Revolution altogether in 1793. Napoleon I somewhat reinstated it, but he mostly multiplied what remains a peculiarity of a French knowledge economy, namely the creation of small-scale, highly selective, technical, practical, and scientific schools, such as Polytechnique and École Normale. The Restoration destroyed again the university, and at no point before 1896 did the faculty escape the heavy hand of the administration. And of course, Napoleon III, we call him Napoleon the Petit, never considered that the university was a place for freedom. So the word free in the Free Institute meant that Boutmy decided not to be subservient to the limited and corseted system that had survived the 19th century. Planning for a free university was really a decision to begin from scratch, an adventure that continues today. What is so puzzling is that our founder was not at all a scientist. He was a journalist, a person of influence, a publicist, as we say in French. He had no credential of any sort to tackle the new adventure, nor was he wealthy. But free? That he was. Free to make his own choices. He could name as teachers whoever he found interesting, with having to look at degrees and rank, and without asking permission from anyone, not from the government and not from any committee. I'm sure the educator among us have a great feeling of envy at this perspective. But what was the topic around which Boutmy and his friend wanted to build their new school? A topic whose absence was, according to them, the main cause of a catastrophic conclusion of the whole century of failed experiment in government. It was the absence of any regular, complete, systematic academic training in matters of governing. They were shocked to realize that in the whole apparatus of a French state at the time, there was no other training than that occurring on the spot, and haphazardly at that. Of course, you could get courses in administrative law here, in geography there, in history somewhere else, but nowhere could you find in the same place systematically taught and for a single goal. For Boutmy, such a situation was just as shocking as if you had no medical school to train physicians or no labs to train physicists. So l'École libre des sciences politiques was a deliberate attempt to create from scratch a curriculum for a discipline which had to be invented, political sciences in the plural, to provide the basic training needed to the new fonctionnaire that the Third Republic was heavily recruiting. The great irony is that 150 years later, most of the high-level personnel and quite a few ministers and former and actual president have come from this free university that Boutmy had devised against the weight of government in academic matters. It's difficult today in the grand corps of the administration, in journalism, and among the assistants of members of parliament to find people who are not former students of Sciences Po. The idea of equipping the Third Republic with a large cadre of mid to high-level personnel has been fully accomplished. In a way, one could say that Boutmy succeeded too well. One of the reasons for such a resounding success, I'll try to get that if rain doesn't stop us before, is that this idea was, from the beginning, to multiply the links with the apparatus of the state by asking practitioners to teach in the school, giving them equal footing with the academic personnel he also wanted to select at will. And he selected some of the great minds of the time. Élie Lévy, Lucien Lévy-Bruhl. I see that lots of people are going to leave. Gabriel Tard. Initially, his idea was that basic science training. On arrête ou on continue? On the whole, for the many tribulations narrated so well in the celebratory book for the centennial, the original project. T'es trop petit. Non, mais je vois plus personne. To celebrate 150 years of struggle, creativity, and accomplishment is a great and necessary moment in the history of an institution. However, it would be a very miserable way to honor the memory of our founder if we were simply to bask in their successes. Allow me now to follow the founder path by insisting on what I see as a striking parallel between the situation Boutmy trying to solve by the project of a free university and the situation which we are in today. The trauma of a Franco-Prussian war was indeed terrible, but it is of a small magnitude nonetheless when compared to the traumatic experience of living through the 50-year war of failed attempt to deal with what I call the new climatic regime. We have been defeated and defeated again. And this time, the defeat is worldwide. And the sudden inclusion of the Ukraine war adds an insuperable weight to the whole experience of being an adult in charge of educating the youth. If Boutmy was aghast at seeing the lack of training and the absence of basic knowledge in the governmental apparatus of his time, how should we react when we realize that from the president to the humblest agent of administration, very few, I insist, very few, has even a smattering of earth science, neither a vague idea of the feedback loops of a planet within which he or she operates, not an inkling of how other cultures, other people even more impacted by the planetary mutation than we are here, are coping with the challenge. Yes, Boutmy was right at the time to diagnose the lack of systematic training in political science as the reason why government had failed or why France did not find great men and women at the time of perils. But I'm asking you, ladies and gentlemen, am I not right to attribute the repeated defeat of our governments, and this time it's all governments, to the complete absence of vast cadre of agent, fonctionnaire, and administrator? I can't continue. I don't know what it is in your various universities, but our experience here in Sciences Po is that our students are way ahead of their professors and mentors in the depth of their anxiety. However, and this is especially troubling, the anxiety, panic, depression, and trauma of those youth are not met with a complete, lengthy, systematic training in what would help them to act efficiently on the new mutation, and even less thereby to equip the state apparatus with a large cadre of efficient, motivated, well-trained fonctionnaires. Actually, in France, the bad situation is compounded by the sad reality that hundreds of agents in charge of what is officially called the ecological transition have actually been laid off in forestry, meteorology, energy, and biodiversity. All those low-level people have been laid off. The 50 years war of denial, indifference, hesitation, and incompetence continue. And thus, we have ended up with a state that is mostly disarmed in the face of a new and immense threat. Because of a terrible year we have been through, everyone at last talks of political ecology, but what knowledge they have absorbed is very superficial, it seems. It's not true that catastrophes are enough by themselves to focus the mind. You need people like Boutmy to turn a crisis into an occasion for radical changes. It's clear to me that we are at such a juncture. Continue. I'm in no position to devise a curriculum equivalent to that drawn up by Butmi, this time designed to equip the women and men involved in governing for our own time of crisis amidst the new climate war. Terrestrial sciences are somewhat more difficult to teach practically and academically than our political ones. Or at least this is how we feel before having tried. One of the key features is, of course, the link between social and natural sciences. Not the whole of them, but the branches that deal directly with the loops inside which modern industrial humans are involved, and where the tipping point must be faced head-on, which means large chunks of biochemistry, atmospheric physics, and what used to be called physical geography, selection necessary for those who later will be in the daily practice of governing. You all have experiences in those linkages, I'm sure. But Sciences Po has been extremely innovative, thanks once more to Richard Descoings, who, by the way, can rightly be named the re-founder of this school. For 15 years, in this school, we have offered double major as well as double master in association with the best. It's like in Westminster. It's a we have been able to offer double major as well as double masters in association with the best scientific university of Paris, at the end of which students, courageous enough to swallow 2 complete curricula, may choose to go on in geoscience, biology, physics, mathematics, or in economics, social theory, or law. Indeed, we have begun creating, as I was mentioning before, this cadre of professional with dual training, and I'm pleased to say that now they began to occupy several of the jobs necessary for taking up the many challenges of a climate mutation. But this is just one of a series of necessary steps toward a full curriculum. As Butmi had seen so vividly, and with such a pre-science, you cannot have any idea about a good government without a feel for the range of all humanities. Even though today, of course, the word humanity becomes somewhat of a misnomer. We should really call them humanities in distress. What has happened to all the human sciences is that they have been violently impacted by the urgent necessity of acknowledging and addressing the non-human agents knocking at the door. So, just a few examples. The new curriculum should include a social theory capable of vastly expanding the range of agents composing the social world. We see that the Ways law is working hard to tackle the many cases where property rights, corporate laws, and the theory of commons are entangled, and how it is being challenged by the many activists who realize how limited are the definition of what owns what and who and why. We wonder what would it mean to teach geopolitics and the theory of state when none of the issues our students have to handle sit inside the border of a national state. History, so important to Butmi, has been deeply renewed by environmental history, And now it makes no sense to teach it as if history was that of humans in a sort of stable landscape. How could you teach political philosophy when the very idea of free autonomous agent voting as part of representative government appears everywhere to be abandoned for want of an alternative? As for inventing the alternative, that's quite a job. There is not one discipline that is not indeed in need of being reassembled, retooled to absorb the student and to be rendered usable for our student. Students, we should not forget, who will in 20 years bear the full weight of our incapacity to teach them today the skill that would prepare them for what is coming. Here lies the key difference that ends the parallel with the time of Boutmy. He wanted to prepare students for modernizing the state, that we do. But now that the problem has shifted to the task of preparing them to ecologize the whole civilization, this we won't do. For Boutmy, the war was behind him. He could not, of course. He died long before the First World War. But for us, it's behind and in front of us. What is so interesting for scholars in all disciplines is that their skill could become relevant again if only they invested massively in coping with the new challenges. Geography was for Boutmy one of the great disciplines. But geography has split into human and natural geography just at the time when they should have been rejoined. Still, geography should in a way be the backbone of a new curriculum, together with anthropology, which has become so central to exploring the enormous diversities of ways to handle the multiplicity of non-human agents composing the world of most of the other people, those we used to call others before realizing they were close to us and often ahead of us in living through catastrophes we had triggered for them. Allow me to insist on the importance of what is called elsewhere performance science, design, or simply the liberal arts. Do you seriously imagine it's possible to handle the new civilization mutation with 20th century ideas about what is a novel, a play, a film, an installation? Without the art, you cannot handle the traumatic experience of the 50 years war of denial, indifference, and incompetence. You have no way to metabolize the affect associated with the trauma. You become mad, we become mad. The art should be part of the curriculum as well. Given that this is not always advertised, I need to point out that every student of Sciences Po has to spend 2 complete semesters practicing an art under the guidance of a master. This work is evaluated and graded, and it's compulsory. Every year, this school, asks about 200 masters in the art to teach their practice, not the idea, their practice to our students, from cinema to typography, from radio to dance. Maybe I'm boasting, but it's all right in a day of celebration. I don't think you see this anywhere. Harvard tried to do it for years, and we did it in 1 semester. You also might not know that we created again with Richard Descoings a School of Political Arts, SPEEP, that every year equipped 20 to 25 young professionals, architects, artists, physicians, and activists with the range of skills necessary to inquire about the new civilizational mutation. Inquiry being the center of a curriculum inspired, of course, by John Dewey's pragmatist tradition. Inquiry is what takes students away from the terrible habit of believing in problem solving, whereas redefining what the problem could be is the central task of the inquirer. And exactly what basic science, this is exactly where basic science should help them to do once students are in the field. Education is not problem solving. It's education to find what the problem is. And here we are not far from the central intuition of Butmi to never divorce basic research from practitioner. Devising the curriculum of a new free university for terrestrial science with the aim of training the new cadre of administrators of the state, as well as for the corporate and media sphere, will of course be fraught with controversy. But I'm convinced that failing to do so is not an option. What would it mean to claim to have a department of Affaires Publiques where those new questions would not be massively taught? They are the Affaires Publiques. Ladies and gentlemen, let me now bring this celebratory lecture to close by insisting on one of the main planks of Émile Butmi's original project, and the one to which this school has been most faithful, namely the presence of practitioners or scholars exterior to the school in greater numbers than tenured professors inside it. 4,000 of them today. This fact has been a source of quite a lot of condescension from the other institutions in Paris. I have to confess that myself, I could not take seriously before I arrived a university where full-time professors were a minority. But now I think the presence of practitioners should be cherished, vastly developed, and maybe rearranged. Let me explain. As unfortunately all educators know, everywhere in the world the trickle-down model of university is in crisis. Either students no longer want to pay for a training they find more and more empty, or scholars and scientists are complaining that this model is no longer sustainable. What I call the trickle-down model of a university is the one invented in Germany by Wilhelm von Humboldt at the beginning of the 19th century and which has since spread everywhere. You endow chairs and laboratories for scientists to freely pursue their quest for knowledge, which is good. But you do so in the hope that many years down the road, those chunks of knowledge will have reached the masses of people through textbook, museum, entertainment, and such. You don't have to care for the precise mechanism. And that in the end, those masses will now be fully enlightened. What you do have to care about is the judgment of your peer. And we should never be fooled on this question. We are specialists of that here. Autonomy of research most of the time means full dependency on the evaluation of peers and funding agency. The theory of trickle-down knowledge is as outdated as that of trickle-down economics. I knew this before, but I was struck when learning that the city of Cambridge had overwhelmingly voted Remain in the fateful Brexit referendum, but that the Shire of Cambridge had just as massively voted Leave. Obviously, the fountain of knowledge of Cambridge College had not inundated the Shire. This is the great simile for what could be called a dangerous irrelevance of university based on the trickle-down model of knowledge production when dealing with the climate mutation. You will ask, are there alternatives? Are we not stuck forever in this model? I hope not, and this is where the experience of this school could serve the goal of real innovation. Isabel Stengers wrote a brilliant essay, Another Science is Possible, and introduced the slogan, Slow Science, and thousands of experiments have been attempted to let researchers meet those who need their science, but also, and this is the main point, so that the people most impacted by the climate mutation are able to suggest, propose, impose, accompany, and even participate in the research. The mode order here is the shift from university to pluriversity. I regret not having the time to talk about all those attempts, but I will just stress the case of the nouveau commanditaire science, which helps connecting people in need of science with scientists in need of original topic through the intermediation of a specialized professional. That's no longer trickle down, and it's not a belittling of basic science either, quite the opposite. The basic research front should be expanded, but its place is being shifted. It's now at the back of those who are in close contact with the practitioner, providing them with the most advanced tool to help them deal with the crisis. Basic research is still there, but it's not an avant-garde, but more like the back office in support of the research front in need of a full reorganization. And of course, the word practitioners changes its meaning as well. It does not only designate members of a Conseil d'État or journalists or politicians, but also those to whom the whole research is now devoted and who, in a small but decisive part, are leading it. They should be also in the role of Sciences Po, or Sciences Po should go to them. The detail of this radical shift in the organization of the university are still obscure, but I'm sure that it's the way to go. And that Sciences Po, once again, has an advantage in developing it because of its long experimentation in weaving academic and practitioners. Ladies and gentlemen, I first remind you of Émile Boutmy project. I then sketched, very superficially, the new curriculum necessary to fulfill our duties as educator in the new climatic regime. And I concluded, again, much too briefly, on the big turnabout that will shift research university out of a model so ill-adapted to a situation it could not anticipate. I apologize. It's a festival. I have found not a better way to entertain you during the celebration of our school. Thank you for your patience.